I believe Christian charities and churches should step up and feed and to clothe and to be a helping hand, not government. In fact, we used to be a country that we had a lot more private charities going and helping people in need. In fact, I would make a contention, if the government cut all of its social welfare, every church would step up to make sure that no kid went hungry in this country and that no kid would die of starvation.
If Jesus fed people for free, taught people for free, and healed people for free, why don't we do the same?
Churches should.
Churches should? Okay. But why can't we do that on a more systemic level through government programs? Hey, maybe private companies with all of their record profits. Why hasn't Elon put up some of his own private money to help end homelessness?
Because homelessness is not a money problem. Almost every single one of them has either mental problems or drug disorders. It is not a matter of lack of capital. It's that they should either be in an asylum or they're doing hard drugs and they don't want to stop. We have homelessness.
Asylums that Ronald Reagan defunded? There are asylums that Ronald Reagan
Yes, if we want to talk about bringing back asylums, I'm all for that.
I'm Sham, and I'm back with a brand new track, and you're like, who the fuck is this homeless guy? He's just ranting and raving. I mean, I have a BA in political science with honors, and people are going to pay attention to aesthetics. If I wore a suit and said the same thing, more acceptable. If this was written down on a piece of paper, countered to somebody else, and you only saw the words, things would be different. As Dan Lanning, the Oregon football coach, said, we are not rooted in cliques, we are rooted in substance. So many times, things are based on popularity, and that's the wrong way to go about it. Here's some real talk, and please, logic over emotion. I love doing this at night. I'm a night owl. That's where I get my energy. I know it's weird doing stuff in the darkest hours of the night. Maybe there's a certain amount of us that kind of love the calmness, getting away from the chaos of normal hours. And this is when our mind is churning. My mind is churning 24/7, 365. My entire life, and probably going to remain so until I die. So, today's particular topic has to do with public, meaning government, versus private, meaning maybe organizations like religious organizations, food banks, and such, and why you can't cut government aid and rely on private organizations to pick up that tab. Because I've heard arguments, I don't want to get too confrontational. I was watching a Charlie Kirk clip, rest in peace. I don't want to I disagree with some of the stuff he says. I agree with some of the stuff he says. This is not about politics or, looking at somebody's character or whether that you vibe with them or not. But he was talking about how we can do without public service, we can do without government aid, and that organizations such as churches would be able to step in and fill that void. I'm sorry, but that is not possible, and I'm going to give you a few points. Government is an overarching entity. Those of us who are legal and registered within the system are accountable, meaning that we can all be specifically targeted for certain aid, for certain services. No matter where we live, no matter what our situation is, it is going to come in. Now, if you rely on a private entity, for example, a religious organization, they naturally are limited. They only have so much access to resources, mostly what they're able to fundraise and then purchase, not to mention that their clientele needs to be able to reach them. Whereas government can reach everybody. There's direct deposit and similar, ways of distributing aid no matter where you're at. Imagine if you're just in a complete remote area that doesn't have access to these private charities. That means you're never going to get any sort of help. or you're going to really have to struggle to get to a place. And even then, the private entities are finite. They are limited by certain resources. I mean, everything is finite, but they have more of a limiting factor because their budget doesn't encompass all of the taxpayer money that comes in. And also, there's not so much obligation, because they can say, hey, we don't want to serve you for whatever reason. We don't have this, we don't have that. Our hours are this, our hours are that. You need to qualify this way or that way. What I think is great, it's the current system. They're complementing each other. So you have this guarantee, which is the public sector, which is the government, which can come in and provide this overarching system of distribution. And then you have these private entities which can supplement that. But if you say, let's do without public services and we only rely on private, that is there's too much choice and chance in that. There's just too many variables, and those variables are random. So yeah, I mean, in theory, it's a great idea. Yes, the ideal is that a community would take care of its own. Village raises a child, and everything is utopian. It's all taken care of at a very intimate, personal level. There is too many constraining factors. What if that village is poor, right? Then you can't possibly help everybody. They're in survival mode. You are in survival mode. That's why it takes a greater group, such as the government, in order to step in and administer that, and then you're going to supplement it with whatever local resources you have at your disposal. And then also, let's look at some scumbag companies. Walmart. They strategically limit hours to their employees so that they can also qualify for government aid. So essentially, a company like Walmart is passing off their obligations to the federal government in order to cover stuff like food and healthcare. Now, you know, that's a very big issue, and you know, something that only the government can deal with. Now, if you were to do the same strategy and say, okay, we're going to pass this off to a public entity, then that public entity needs to be so large that monetarily they can cover food and health, and do that in a systemic way that reaches the most people. Again, I'm going to go back. There are some people that are remote and they can't just easily do this stuff, and ultimately there is a limiting factor to a private entity. Their resources, their funds will never equal that of a government, because we pay taxes to a government. They have a large sum of money, and a private entity can't do that. Not to mention that private entities then need to have this headache of coordinating an overall effort, which is impossible. Whereas the public government operates as one entity that operates within this entire nation, so coordination is that much easier. Again, I wish that we had things that were more organic, that we took care of each other on a more personal level. But the fact is that there are so many more limits to doing things privately than having the government take over, and you want to call this socialism. You can only do so much as a person, as a group. So, again, we need government to step in certain aspects. Food, healthcare, those are paramount. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, need to fulfill them. And the only way, the best way to do that is to have a power which we are in awe of, and that is the central government.